Our next guest, the executive director for the Foundation for Freedom Online, Mr. Mike Bence. Mike, you've been listening to a harrowing recount of one of the most tragic moments maybe ever in American history. The young man was front row to a heinous assassination. What are you hearing? First of all, what are you hearing? And then you can weigh in on what you heard just a moments ago.
It's all mortifying. I think it changes the history of this country. It casts a pall of death over what had been really an unbroken series of successes. It's felt like within this movement, within the cultural unity and solidarity that people have felt. This is a loss of an unbelievable and hard to process magnitude. Charlie was a force of nature. I would not be here without Charlie. I don't think we, as a movement, as a cause, would be here without Charlie. He was a child prodigy in this, with a very unique set of gifts that you almost never see in the same person. What this cause needed most in the early days, a decade ago, were institutions. There was a feeling within America and a voter base and an electorate and moms and dads and kids who had a feeling about the way they wanted the direction of this country to go in. But what really makes a cause or a movement durable is the construction of institutions. And there were no MAGA institutions until this 18-year-old kid, Charlie, shows up and he builds not just any institution. He went straight into the lion's den, the most hostile place on planet Earth for an American populist cause. Colleges and universities. I think Turning Point now is 3,500 college chapters. When I was in college, nobody wanted to be labeled a conservative. Nobody wanted to be labeled a Republican. All there was college Republicans, which was a social death sentence. There was no community. There was no solidarity. There were no events. There were no speakers or parties or networking or everyone having each other's back. And Charlie built that from the ground up. And he did that as a communicator, as a long-term strategist, as a bridge builder. I think Charlie had the most difficult job out of anyone. In some ways, more difficult than the president. He had to wrangle every side of MAGA, all of the cultural flare-ups between one side of MAGA versus another, between one side of an issue versus another. And he had to always find a way to bridge them together in order to keep them unified as a cohesive, unified force. And that's very, very, very difficult to do. And that responsibility was put on. You sometimes see that in the wisdom of elders who are able to be diplomatic spokesmen, ambassadors, communicators, but also clear, linear, logical thinkers. Charlie did that as a kid. Every room he walked in, it looked like Charlie was president or was about to be president. When you see him next to presidents, he looks like he's going to be president. I could see him as having been J.D. Vance's vice president in the next election cycle. He turns 35. He did the impossible, building institutions, and that gave a green light to other people that try to build institutions. So we need 1,000 more institution builders, and we just lost our best one to a cold-blooded, gruesome, grisly, broad daylight execution. I think what has to happen at this point has to be an extraordinary message sent from our FBI and law enforcement. An example has to be made.
We're 24 hours plus out from the assassination. No sign. They have a person of interest that they may be talking to, but how does a guy get away from this amount of people, these amount of phones and cell phones? Does it not feel to you like there was more people than one shooter involved in this?
I don't know. I don't know. The range of possibility is very wide. I hesitate to express exactly what my inclinations are in a moment like this, because there's so little information in terms of, we know it was a rooftop shooter. We know it was essentially a one-shot sniper, dead on.
Mike, let me do this. And I know, and everyone's going to pull a soundbite if Mike says something or Eric says something that ends up being wrong later. Listen, Wall Street Journal, Drudge reporting, ammunition engraved with trans anti-fascist ideology. It's not us. It's not Mike or Eric or Rav. It's on Drudge right now, and I saw Wall Street Journal saying that one of the shell casings, I think, was what they found with an engravement on it. Now, if true, it changes the dynamic a little, doesn't it?
Certainly, if that bears out to be true. I just know that there have been a few things that have been walked back in the past 24 hours, and so I'm trying. Frankly, Eric, I'm filled with enough rage right now that I want to make sure it's directed at the proper targets. I feel the impulse in me, as I think probably millions do, that as soon as we find this monster, I want him strung up. I want crows to eat his insides out. I want it to be publicly televised after a guilty verdict, due process, and administered by the law. But I want the most monstrous, gruesome death that we just had to watch. I want that to be etched into the halls of eternity, so that anyone who tries to do anything like this ever again sees what their own insides look like on national television. And their family will have to see it the way Charlie's has had to see his. I think about whoever did this, if they had to stand in a room with Charlie, and how Charlie would tower over them, how they wouldn't stand a chance in a fist fight or a verbal fight or anything. And a coward, a pussy. Whoever that is, the most unspeakable things have to be administered by our law enforcement.
Brings up the question, Mike. Brings up the question.
So I hesitate. All I'm saying is I hesitate to point it at the responsible group until we know who that is.
I agree. However, I'm again, not Mike or Eric reporting or Rav reporting. New York Post right now just came out. A rifle recovered in the hunt for conservative influencer Charlie Kirk's assassin contained ammo engraved with, quote, transgender and anti-fascist ideology, according to preliminary reports from law enforcement sources. I mean, I
just want to make sure that I know, Eric, I just want to make sure that's 100% true before I lean into it, because if that is true,
that's fair.
And I agree. I know I disagree with the editorial line of the Wall Street Journal quite frequently, and I have seen them factually, in my view, misreport things in the past. And given that our own FBI has released 2 suspects on this already, I want a higher degree of certainty before I commit that is indeed where this is coming from.
We've had the discussion on this show last week and the beginning part of this week. Should transgender people be barred from purchasing firearms, owning firearms in America? And I would stand on the side, especially if this is true. Again, we just saw the same thing happen in Minneapolis, where a couple of young school children were murdered, assassinated, killed while they're praying in church, and the inscriptions on the gunmen's guns and magazines were anti-Trump, kill Donald Trump. And this was a trans guy doing this, right? It's trans dude. But
Eric, I totally understand it.
If this is true, if this gun that they found did have those markings and it belonged to the shooter, I will continue to say that there's something going on in the trans community. I'm not saying all gay. I'm saying in the trans community, there's something happening. There's something affecting their ability to ration and reason. And maybe it's the drugs they need to take to try and change their gender. Then they're going to change it, but try and change their gender. And it does push into the area of, yes, if you can be mentally unstable and not be allowed to own a gun, or if you can need a medical marijuana card in some states and not own a gun or have an open carry license, then guess what? I believe that whatever's going on in the trans community, we need to investigate, because there's probably some sort of link there. In my opinion, not Rav's, not Mike's, just Eric's.
Right. And where I am on this is I want to see those engraved casings posted by the FBI X account. I want to see them on FBI.gov. I want to get it firsthand from Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, so that we know that this is actually the truth, rather than getting it secondhand from the Wall Street Journal, whose reportage I've not been particularly impressed by in the past several years. And I just want to make sure that that is 100% true, because obviously the trans community, I think, has been disproportionately celebrating this death. You can go on Blue Sky and just see post after post of he, her, them, they, celebrating this in the most monstrous way possible. You've seen calls from radical members of those communities calling for Charlie's death long before this. I keep a pretty close nose to the grindstone on these left-wing commentary communities online. I think it's important for folks on the conservative side to read what folks with opposing views say to each other, especially when they don't think you're listening. And Charlie was disproportionately a target, almost more than anyone else I can think of, for many, many months and years before this, even though he was arguably the most moderate of all of the large right-wing MAGA voices. But certainly the trans community and many other aspects of the cultural so-called progressive far left, much more far left
Mike,
side.
You're a very smart guy. A lot of people listening to you, they take your word. They need to process this. All the heightened rhetoric. I did a whole monologue with probably 10 different sound bites of progressive liberals kind of blaming Charlie for his own demise, or calling Trump and any one of his supporters, Charlie being one of his biggest, Hitler and Nazis, and basically planting seeds to grow into what these are, these evil acts of assassinations or assassination attempts in Trump. Is there a tie, in your opinion?
Well, the SPLC drew a target map with it looked like basically a bullet sight on Charlie's Turning Point USA. If you remember this heat map of extremist groups and this sort of moral quandary, if you could go back in time and kill baby Hitler, has been very normalized. This idea that if it would change the trajectory of history, it's actually okay to engage in first-degree premeditated, cold-blooded homicide. And I think
it's
anyone
you say that, because I often think of this in the last 24 hours, change the course of history. And I think it was you that mentioned Charlie was someone
Kirk was
that
going to be our president.
He could have been a president. He could have
Eric,
been.
There you go. There's no way. The boy was 31 years old, and he already was the key matchmaker, power broker, fundraiser, institution builder. There is no way Charlie Kirk would not have been a president of the United States at some point in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. He was chosen for that. He spent his whole life in this. He was the perfect person for this. He was the bridge between every element of the MAGA movement. And they shot that bridge in the crux of his neck in broad daylight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mike Benz, changed the course of history. Thought about it all the way, all morning long. Did they? They may have. And you're passionate about that. Mike, good having you. I appreciate your time. We'll stay on and we'll bring you back as things warrant. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Eric. Be safe.
All right. You too, Mike.